Hey guys, let's try that again. Unfortunately, it just seems like I was talking for the last half an hour to myself, or you could hear me, but you weren't able to see my screen. The software we're using to present this live to you guys looks like it's having a bit of a trouble today. So yeah, look, let's try and start that again. Hopefully, this time around you can see my screen, and yeah, let's give that another shot. So. I'm just going to sort of pause here for a second and check myself on my phone. Yeah, it looks like you can see my screen this time. All right. So, at the risk of sort of repeating myself, I do think I should start this again and go back over the sync model. So let's start there. Let's go back to the 3D warehouse, and I'm going to walk you through first of all the sync one that I've just done, just to show you kind of that again, where you can see it on my screen. Apologize for the inconvenience there. Hey, these things happen when you're live. Hey, so let's start here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 3D warehouse. So I'm just going to jump into the main screen of the 3D warehouse. Now, the 3D warehouse itself is it's a tool that you can use to download SketchUp models and import them into Mozaik. The 3D warehouse is something that anyone can upload to. So you or I could download, or we could draw a model and then upload and share it to the 3D warehouse. So it's a sort of word of warning there that the models might not necessarily be professionally drawn, and you might need to consider that when downloading models that they might have issues with them, or maybe they're not just exactly what you're looking for. But there are thousands of examples on here, so it's certainly a good resource to start with. I will sort of give an overview of how to browse around the 3D warehouse. There is a search option at the top where you can search for exactly what you want. Personally, I find if you're just searching for a generic term like sync, for example, that there is going to show you thousands of options for syncs. It's not really going to be too specific or too generic. So you might want to try and narrow that down by searching for certain phrases like kitchen sink, for example. And that's going to give you a probably better view. But again, still, I find unless you're looking for a specific model of like a certain brand, then it's a bit hard to find the item that you want, or you'll be scrolling through thousands of choices. Coming back to the 3D warehouse, there's a couple of other key ways I like to sort of browse the options here. In the categories, an option that I would recommend would be looking at building products as a category, because that's going to break it down to something that's more specific and used in our industry to begin with. And then the subcategory, I would look at the example that you're trying to do. So if you're looking for hardware items or cabinets or appliances or lighting, you can go into these different subcategories. Of course, in our example today, I wanted to sort of focus on how to import models into Mozaik, and we're going to look at the two options, which I'll just drop on the screen here. We're going to look at how to import in sinks and pools. So two sort of varying topics that have just a few different steps and processes to get you from start to finish. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and choose a sync. But before I do, I want to sort of show you one other way of browsing these categories. You can also use the featured catalogs inside the 3D warehouse. So 3D warehouse has this great option called featured catalogs, where you can dive into a particular brand. And inside that brand, they have different subcategories. So if you're looking for example, a range hood, you could then browse that particular category's version of range hoods that are all professionally drawn, as these are sort of a featured professional catalog as such. So that's another way that you can do it. So the example that I wanted to use was this example here called the Tika brand. So it's one of the featured catalogs. So it's a professionally drawn model. And I'm going to go ahead and download this option and show you this. So as this is the sort of second time that I'm doing this, for any of you that watched the sort of first attempt of this session, it's going to come up that it's already in Mozaik, but I'll just sort of walk you through those steps now that you can see my screen. So I'm going to open up that particular 3D model. So just double clicking on that, that's going to launch in SketchUp. Of course, it depends on the version of SketchUp that you have running on your computer. I'm running 2022. And what I want to do here is show you, the first step I always do is turn on my axis indication. So I'm going to go to the View menu and turn on Axes, because I want to see exactly where this sink is sitting. And if you have a look, the sink itself is sitting way out in the front of the axis here. So it's elevated quite high and it's sort of pushed forward fairly far, and it's even across to the left slightly. Now, if we compare that to one of the options in Mozaik, so I'm going to go back to my C drive, my Mozaik folder. I'm going to go inside the SketchUp folder, and I'm going to look at the standard double sink SKP file. I'm going to open that one up and show you in comparison from where one sink sits compared to the other. All right, so now that the new SketchUp model is open, let's flick across to that one. So this is the standard double sink from Mozaik. So I've got hidden geometries turned on. I'm going to turn that off just to make that a bit neater. The key thing about this, and the key takeaway, is that you want this sink to sit in that front left-hand corner. So that's the important thing here, is that you can see the red axis here that indicates the front of the sink. And I've got the sink positioned right on the front line of that red axis indicator. And the green axis indicator is the left-hand version of the sink, or left-hand side of the sink. And you can see that the left-hand edge of the sink is also positioned exactly on that. So this is where Mozaik wants to see the sink positioned. And then if we look at the up and down, which is the blue axis, the bottom edge of that sink is positioned right on where the axes all sort of intersect. So we want to make sure that we get the bottom edge of the sink sitting right on that axis indicator as well. So that way, when the sink comes in, it sits on the countertop. And we're going to take a look at how to do that as well. Now, one thing I wanted to point out when you're looking at the standard sinks in Mozaik, that there is a 2D version of that sink as well. So it has the same name and it just has the underscore 2D flag there. What that does, that generates a basic sort of 2D version, or it's a 2D drawn version of that sink that's a bit simpler. And Mozaik will swap that out and present you with that version when you're looking at a plan view or an elevation view. And it's just a way of having that as a nice, neat kind of aspect when you're looking at plans and elevations. So I'm going to show you this by looking at the front indicator, by clicking the front house sort of icon there. You could also get to that by going to the camera and going to standard views and selecting front. And if we zoom in nice and close here, you'll see what I'm looking at here. It's basically just a straight shot of a simple CAD drawing that's showing me the faucet and the bowl of the sink, and also the outline of the sink itself. Again, drawn around the axis so that the top of the sink sitting above the red axis indicator, the bowls are sitting below the axis line, and the faucet or tap is obviously sitting on top of the sink as well. And then when we look from the top down perspective, what we're seeing there is that we're looking at a plan view, again, a basic view of that sink in plan view aspect. So we're just seeing that sink from the plan view. And again, if I showed you this in 3D, you can see it's just a flat drawing, and it's just a way of making that look a bit neater. Now, this isn't, you don't need to do this. Mozaik will generate kind of like a basic 2D, 3D version of that sink. It'll use your sort of 3D model, and it'll basically try and show you that in plan and elevation. But if you wanted to be specific about showing something neater and nicer, and it also helps speed up the use of Mozaik, because it's not having to show you that full 3D model in plan view and elevation view if it doesn't have to. So definitely the 2D versions are a great idea. I just wanted to sort of point that out and show you how that worked. So coming back to my sink download now, I need to get that in the right position. That's sort of step one. I've downloaded the sink that I like, and I want to get that into the right spot in the SketchUp drawing. Because if I leave it out here, my countertop's going to be down here, and it's going to be way up, way higher, and in front of my countertop, which is not going to work very well. So I'm going to use the M key on the keyboard and press M for move, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the top section of that sink, and I'm just going to go ahead and move my mouse, and you'll see it very easily snaps to the origin point there of where those axis points intersect. That's a really quick and easy way of getting the left edge and the front edge all in a line with that axis point. However, I do want to make sure that the bottom of the sink comes up to sit in line with those axis indicators as well. An easy way that I like to do this is just go ahead and find a point underneath, click on that point, and then press the up arrow on the keyboard. That locks this to the blue axis indicator here. And as you'll see, if I move my mouse to the left or to the right, it doesn't move away from the up and down axis. So very easily, I can go ahead and click on that origin point again, and it's going to snap that into position nicely. So quite easy to get that into the right position. Looking at the sink there, you can make changes to this sink if you like. If you don't want to see the logo for the particular brand, or maybe you want to remove a certain part of the sink, you could go double click into it and edit the model. I could just delete that section out. I could leave that there. Again, it depends on how you want to view this model. Looking at this, I can't really see like a cutout for a faucet. Maybe that is what this is indicating. However, this does appear to be in the right perspective according to the way the model was showing on the 3D warehouse. It was sort of showing as a right-hand drain sink. So I would leave that as is. And what I would do now is go ahead and save that. Now, important thing when you're saving a SketchUp model, if you're trying to bring that into a specific product libraries folder, then it needs to go in that product libraries folder. So if I go into the C drive Mozaik folder and then come down to product libraries, I'm going to go in and select the library that I'm using, which is the CADmate library V11. And I'm going to go inside now the products folder. So the key thing here is wherever your product libraries are stored, whether they're on your C drive or they're on a shared location like Dropbox or OneDrive or something like that, find your product libraries folder, open up the library itself that you want to save the sync to, and then go ahead and open up the products folder, and that is where you want to save the sync. So you'll see that I've done that previously with the Tika sync, but I'm going to go ahead and do this again. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and go File, Save As, and I'm going to find that location. So I'm just going to go back to this PC, C drive, and Mozaik, and then into product libraries, CADmate library V11, and then products. And I'm going to save this product in here. Now, the name could be whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to call this Tika example sync. And the key thing here that you can't forget is that you need to save this as a SketchUp 8 model. Mozaik backwards supports SketchUp models through to version 8. So you want to make sure that you're saving your models as a V8 model. That way it can be compatible with any of these versions of SketchUp back to V8. So that's a key thing that you need to remember to do there. So go ahead and save that file type as a SketchUp 8 and then press save. Now that I've done that, I'm sort of done with the SketchUp side of things. I'll come back shortly just to take some dimensions. But next step really is diving into Mozaik and then adding that item into your product library. So I'm going to go into libraries and products. Select the library that you want to add it to. So for me, I've just saved it into that CADmate library V11. Yours might be called something different, or maybe you want to put it in one of the other folders like the plumbing and electrical folder. It's totally up to you where you want to place that. But for me, I'm going to use this as an example. And we've got a few different categories already in here for sinks. So you can see under SketchUp models and sinks, we've got a different sort of category already there that I can use that drop-in sinks folder. However, if you don't have a folder there, you can easily go ahead and create one. I'll just quickly show you how to do that. So I'm going to minimize a few folders there, right click and go add, and then come down and I can choose add a folder to the root drive, which will be a top level folder, which will give me another kind of folder structure in my library. Or if I want to add a subfolder, I can choose any one of the folders that I already have, right click and go add, and then add a folder, and that's going to add a subfolder in. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead, right click on the drop-in sinks and choose add a product. So that's the key step there. You want to add a product in and give this a name. Again, I'm going to call that the Tika example sink, just to distinguish it from the first one. Go ahead and press OK. And then we are presented with the sort of standard Mozaik interface for any product. And what we want to do here is go through the sort of steps. There's a few that you want to do. You can give that a description. I want to change the type because it's not a cabinet that I'm trying to make. It's an appliance. I'm going to make that an appliance. I'm going to choose the subtype as a double sink, or it could be a single sink, as pretty much that's what that particular one was with that particular model. If I open it back up, it was really just a single bowl. And then coming down, we will give it a size. I'm just going to give it a random size to start with. I'm just going to type in any sort of numbers here, rough numbers, just to get me started. And then on the info tab, now you'll just see that the box is just displaying a black screen there at the moment because I haven't yet told Mozaik where to find the model. And that's the next step. So we're going to go to the info tab. And on the info tab, you'll see an area here called SketchUp model. I'm going to tick use SketchUp model. And then we've got presented with a browse button. So we're going to click the browse button. And that's going to open up that exact same folder structure that we just saved that model into. So again, whichever library you're in, it's going to open up the subfolder called products and then present you with a list of SketchUp models there. So I'm going to open up the Tika example sink, and you'll see that it's displaying that 3D model of that sink to me straight away. Now, if you're not seeing the sink, you probably haven't saved it as a SketchUp 8 model. So make sure then you just go back and save that as a SketchUp 8 model, and then you should see the sink. So that's a key kind of thing where I see a lot of guys get that wrong. They haven't saved it as a SketchUp 8 model. They're not seeing their model. Go back and resave that as a SketchUp 8. Okay, so a couple of things I want to change here. I probably don't want to auto dimension that. There is no cut list on this particular product, so I don't need that. The main key one here to make sure that you remember to do is change where this product snaps to. So when you drag it out and drop it on the screen, you need to tell Mozaik in elevation perspective, where is this sitting? So this is a sink, so we're going to sit it on the countertop. And that's the key bit of linking the sort of where you've positioned it in the axis space in SketchUp to where Mozaik's going to drop that. That's why you wanted to make sure you got that in the right spot in SketchUp so that when it comes in and snaps on the countertop, it snaps exactly where you want it to be. So now that I've got that selected, I'm going to go back to my size tab. I'm going to allow this product to be able to be stretched. So I'm going to turn that on. That's pretty much all I want to do here. You know, there's other things you can do, like you give it prices and things like that, but I'm happy with that for now. So I'm going to hit OK there. And now let's take a look. I've just got a real simple drawing on the screen here. I'm going to delete the previous sink I had there. I might even just rebuild my benchtop as well. That way, where countertop, that way you're not seeing the sort of cutout there. So I just wanted to sort of step you through this process. So let's go ahead and look at how to drop that sink in. So I'm going to go to the elevation view here, and I'm just going to delete this middle cabinet here just to show you the sink first of all, and how this behaves. So in the library, I've saved that into the sinks folder in drop-in sinks. So I'm going to grab the Tika example sink, drag and drop that onto the screen. And as you'll see, it snaps to the left, and I've got the arrow indication here where I can move that from side to side. So I'm going to drag and drop that exactly wherever I want it. Of course, I can be specific and give that an exact sort of location of where I want it to sit in object space, left to right, or maybe I want to center it in the room. All those options that you're most likely already familiar with. The first thing I wanted to show you is, I guess, where that sink is sitting in space in terms of in and out. So if I look at this from a floor plan perspective, you'll see that that sink is sitting out slightly. So I probably want to push that back so it sits, the bowl sits a little bit further into my cabinet, and that also it will sit on my countertop correctly, because at the moment that's sitting kind of right on the edge of my countertop, and I want to push that back slightly. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and go to the outset and give that a negative value. So I might want to move that back like 50 or 60 millimeters back so it sits in inside the cabinet. Now I'm going to go ahead and drop a cabinet in. So for me, I do have a sink cabinet in this standard library. So I'm going to go and drag and drop that one in, position that. Now that I've got that and I'm happy with where that sink sit in, I want to go to the tops folder, right click where the sink would be, and choose the option regenerate cutouts. And that's going to give me the cutout. So that way, when I'm now looking at the sink in 3D, I'm seeing the countertop cut out for the sink. And that way I can see an accurate representation of where that model sits and with the sink nicely cut out. So that's the sort of process for a sink from start to finish. The key points there are that you need to make sure that you have a SketchUp model that I guess I didn't really touch on that, but I will explain it. You want something professionally drawn that doesn't have too many faces, right? I'm not too sure if you're familiar with the term faces, but basically when a SketchUp model is drawn, if it's a really intricate model, it's going to have lots and lots of faces. And the more faces that a model has, the harder Mozaik has to work to try and show you that model inside a Mozaik. So having a nice lightweight sort of poly model that isn't too heavy is really important. The second thing is making sure that you get the axis positioning correct. So look at one of the examples from Mozaik for a sink. It's that front left-hand corner on the underside of the sink. That way it sits nicely on the countertop, like our example here. And then you want to save it as a SketchUp 8 model into your products folder, inside your product library folder, whatever your library is, /products. And then it needs to be saved as a SketchUp 8 model. Create a new product in Mozaik, and then enable the SketchUp option and link the SketchUp model to it. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So it's not a difficult process. There's just a few key steps there that you need to get right, especially specifically with that SketchUp 8 model. So, all right. So let's take a look now at the next example of the handle example, and then we'll see if we can throw to some questions and answers as well. So let's dive into that one. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my internet browser again. I'm going to show you in SketchUp or in the Hinge website here. Now, I mean, I could get a model from the 3D warehouse again for a handle or a pull, or I could source it on many places throughout the web. One of the places I like to use are sort of hardware companies that have modeled their specific brand, because I know I can buy that particular pull or hardware item. Unfortunately, not a lot of sort of handle companies or pull companies tend to actually provide 3D models of their products. So, you know, it can be hard to source the exact model. Of course, you could always model it yourself if you're sort of proficient with SketchUp. But I will show you here just how to use the Hinge website to go ahead and get into a Hinge CAD area. So Hinge, quite good. They have an eShop where you can browse items, and then you can download Hinge CAD items of those things that you can browse. So anywhere where you see that Hinge CAD symbol, it has a CAD model of that particular item that you can download and import. So I'm going to pick a fairly left field sort of example here of a sort of brown leather handle to show you kind of how even when you're downloading a professionally drawn model, it may not still be a complete model that you might want to add items to. So let's take a look at that. We're going to go ahead and click on the Hinge CAD symbol. And then what we want to do is go ahead and click into the formats area. And by default, when you first do this, you won't see any formats. So you want to click the Add Formats button. And I'm going to scroll to the bottom. You can use the search, but I'm just going to scroll to the bottom and select the very last one, which is the Trimble SketchUp 2017. Now that I've got my format that I want that SketchUp format for this model, I'm going to go ahead and press the CAD symbol. That's going to download that option. Now, it already tells me that I've already downloaded that previously, so I'll just show you the already downloaded version of that. But what I will point out before I do that is you'll see that this model itself, it's missing the silver kind of, I guess, covers for where the screws would go on that right and left-hand side. We're not seeing the stitching. It is a sort of basic model of that particular handle, but it's going to give you the shape and aspect and I guess we can dress that up in SketchUp a little bit too. So minimizing out of there, and let's open up the downloads folder, and I'm going to go into that folder. So when you first download it, it'll be zipped. Just unzip it, extract it, so that way you can open this up and then get to the actual model itself. Double click on that, and that's going to open that SketchUp model in SketchUp. And what I want to do there is show you the comparison of the way that model looks compared to the way it looks in a standard example from Mozaik. So again, we're talking about getting the positioning of the handle right, so that way when you're looking at it in Mozaik, it's positioned correctly. Right now, you can see that sort of the center of the handle hole is positioned right on that axis, and that's not the way Mozaik wants to see it. So we can open up an example from Mozaik. So we're going to go into C drive Mozaik, and then inside the data folder, we're going to go into the pools folder and take a look at some of these pool examples. So I'm going to focus on sort of that arch pool, and I just want to show you that there are quite a few versions of that particular model. As you can see, I've highlighted them all here. There's 4 versions for each for a door and 4 versions for a drawer. So taking a look at what they are, the reason why doors and drawers are separated, quite often a door might be a vertical handle and a drawer would be a horizontal handle. So for one, it's the rotation, but for 2, it's also that they're treated differently in the positioning aspect in Mozaik as well. So you've got different rules of where you can position a drawer handle compared to where you can position and rotate a door handle. So looking at the door example, you can see that this one is sitting, that the left of the handle is on that green axis, the front of the handle is on the red axis, and up and down, it's sitting right at the bottom of the handle on the up and down blue axis. So that's kind of the position that we want to nail. You can see this is the 3D model of a door handle. And if I go down to the one that just says arch pool number 1 for a drawer and open that up, that's going to give me the 3D view of that drawer version of that same handle. So again, that'll open up in just a second. And same thing again, it's just that it's laying down. So now the front of the handle is on the red axis, the left of the handle is on the green axis, and up and down is still at the bottom of the handle. That's where we want to position it. So that's how we want to mimic that. I will point out that there are then elevation views, plan views, and side views. Like the sink, these are standard examples. So if I open up the elevation view, this is a simplified version. All right, so let's click on the front aspect and show you that. So again, this is like what I showed you with the 2D version of the sink. It's just a real simple 2D view of that particular shape of that handle. So that's the front perspective. I've got a plan view perspective, which again will just be a 2D version from a plan view. So all it is, you can allow Mozaik to sort of generate the 3D image and show you that how that would look in 2D space, or you can provide Mozaik with a plan view or a side view version of these things as well. So as you can see here, this is just a simple 2D version of that particular model. So it's real simple. You can draw these and then save them with that particular tag there, like underscore ELE, underscore plan, or underscore side. And then Mozaik's going to swap that out for that particular model. So you can see here, if I was to look at this one, again, this is from the top-down view going to show me that particular shape rather than a heavy model of that from the plan view or elevation view. So a bit of housekeeping there is just a recap that there are 2 main differences. There's a door version of the handle and a drawer version of the handle. Both of those have a 3D view, and both of those have elevation, plan, and side views if you want them. That's not compulsory, but recommended. Okay, so now let's look at this handle. We want to position that correctly, so I'm going to want to click on the handle, press M for move. I'm going to grab the bottom axis point there and snap that into position. That's going to move that back into pretty much the correct position, exactly where I want that to sit. A couple of things here. 1, it's silver, and 2, I'm missing those buttons and the stitching. The stitching would take a lot longer to sort of draw in, but you could definitely draw that in if you wanted to muck around with that. A real basic view, I'm just going to go to the sort of material section here and just go ahead and grab kind of like a brown lever and drop that onto this model. So I get inside the model and go ahead, select everything and drop that paint option on so I can see that as kind of a lever handle. You might want to lighten that up too. You can go to the sort of RGB values and tweak that to try and get that looking, I guess, a bit lighter in color if you're trying to mimic what it was from the Headitch Cab website. So you can certainly do things like that. I could easily draw a circle here on SketchUp just to position maybe one of those buttons. So I might just grab the center point there and the center point there and go ahead and draw a circle roughly the right size, and then go ahead and pull that out maybe a couple of millimeters. And I would take that particular item and I'd maybe assign a certain material to that as well, like maybe a metal material. Might make that a silver material. That way I've got an indication of that button. And then I might just go ahead and move one. I'll just use the back of the circle here as my move point, press Control to give me a duplicate, and I'm going to snap one to the other side. So, pretty quickly you can manipulate a model and certainly dress it up to look what it's meant to look like. Obviously, the stitching would take a lot longer to do, so I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. Now that I've got the model in the right position, looking how I want it to look, I can now go ahead and save that and bring that into Mozaik. So I'm going to go ahead and go File and Save As, again, because I want to change the file type. I do not want to save it as just a standard SketchUp model. I want to make it a SketchUp 8 model. And then I want to position that correctly inside of Mozaik. So I'm going to go into my C drive and the Mozaik folder. And for this particular one, you want to save it inside your data folder. So it's wherever your data folder's pathed, and then down to the pools category. And from there, that's the location where these models need to go. So in this particular example, I'm just going to call this the Headitch, I think it was called Gala or something along those lines. I'll just bring that website back up. So Gela, G-E-L-A. So I'm going to call it the Headitch G-E-L-A and make that as a SketchUp. Now, of course, I'm making a draw and a door version. So one easy way to try and match the format that's already in there, I'm just going to select sort of that arch pool number 1 for a draw, and I'm just going to reword that to Headitch Gala and keep the brackets /draw. Go ahead and save that. So now that I've got that, of course, I can rotate that and make that my door version. I'm conscious of time and not wanting to make this too long. So let's go ahead and jump back into Mozaik and look at how you can bring that model in. So we'll go into Libraries and then down to Hardware. And under the Pools category, we're going to add a new pull in. So I'm going to give that same name. That from before. Now, you don't need to give this a door draw version because the door draw option exists inside of this already. If you've wanting to save like a preview image of this model, like you could find a nice image there, right click on that and save that image as, and then go ahead and save that into your pools folder. So inside Mozaik, Images, Hardware, and Pools. So this one is not in the data folder, it's in the Images folder, inside Hardware, and then inside Pools. I'm going to go ahead and save that as the Headitch Gala again. You might want to edit that, like, maybe that's sort of zoomed out too much. Like I could do things like I could edit that and, zoom in a bit closer on the actual handle rather than having so much background there. But again, don't want to digress too much. So in here, I can click in the white space and then go ahead and assign that particular image. That way it's got an image that represents the handle. I need to tell it the type of the handle. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a handle or a knob, depending on what it is. It's going to be a handle in this example because it's got 2 holes. And I can give that a cost to mark up and add on, comment. The key thing here is linking the SketchUp model. That's sort of the purpose of this video. So we're going to click on the draw option. We're going to click browse, and then we're going to go ahead and find that particular model. So I'm just going to sort by date modified. It'll have my Headitch Gala option at the top, and I'm going to assign that model as my draw one. Of course, I would need to rotate that handle to make a door version. So coming back, if we get into the SketchUp model here, I could press the Q button for rotate. I could lock my axis to the green axis by pressing the left arrow on my keyboard, and I could grab 2 points and then just simply rotate that. Now, I've got to sort of group the items together first, or I could sort of highlight everything and then do that again. So left arrow, and then go ahead and grab 2 points and rotate that up. Again, I want to make sure that all of that sits inside on the left, so I'm going to move it that way. And that way now I've positioned that as a door handle. So then I would do a file save as, and I would go ahead and change the wording of this one to door and save that. Again, making sure I make that as a SketchUp 8 model. So now I've got the two. I can press browse and then go ahead and create the door version there, assign the door version, and then we come down to a few more options. If I want to drill for that, I can give that a hole diameter, and I can give it, most importantly, the hole separation diameter. So coming back to the sort of specs on the website, there is a specs page there, and if I zoom in on this, it's showing me that it's 128 millimeters from center to center, 150 millimeters sort of overall length, and 26 millimeters as the overall width. So now that I've got that info, I can use that to help me enter this information here. So the hole separation was 128. I want the width of that handle to be 26 millimeters, and the length was 150 millimeters. So the important thing here, the length is not indicating the center of the center, it's the overall length. The hole separation is the center of the center value. Now, the distance that it sits down on a door is from the top of the door to the center of that handle. So thinking about that, I'm just going to bring up a calculator here as an example. So my door itself, my handle itself is 150 millimeters. So if I just say 150 and divide that by 2, that's obviously going to be 75 mil. And I want to add half of the handle separation value. So if I go 128 and divide that by 2, 64 millimeters. So what I'm actually trying to do here, forget about the 150 divided by 2. Really, that hole separation is the key here. So I want to get if I'm trying to get that hole placed sort of 40 millimeters down and 40 millimeters in, I would add 40 to half of the hole separation value. So my hole separation value is 128, half of that 60, add the amount that you want it to sit down. So I'm going to add 40, and that's going to give me a value of 104. So 104 would be to the center of the handle, making half of that 64, and from the top of the door down to the hole would be therefore 40 millimeters. So rule of thumb I always do is just divide the hole separation by 2, add that to the value that I want the first hole to sit down, and you can't go too wrong. So that should be on the value over here. So hole separation still 128. I'm wanting to enter the distance down as 104 from that option there, and then in 40 millimeters from the side. You do have some options whether the door is vertical or horizontal, so you can swap that around if you want to show the door handle itself as a horizontal door handle. And then coming down for the drawers itself, you do have an option here to say, between this height and this height drawer, I want the distance from the top to be X. So you can say like a minimum height that if the drawer was over that size, that's when you want to start dropping the door in, the handle in the center. So you think about this like maybe you want the handle to be in the center, right? Or maybe you want it to be sit 40 millimeters down. So if you said 40 millimeters from the top, if your drawer front was below 80 millimeters, like double that sort of value, it's then going to sit, if it sits down 40 millimeters, it's now going to be, if you've only got a 70 mil high drawer front, it's going to sit, 30 from 30 mil. It's not going to be in the center, which, is not going to look really good. So I would sort of say, okay, rule of thumb, sort of half the value of what you want it to sit down from the top. That would be the minimum. Maximum, it's up to you, depending on, at what point you're happy to stop that rule. You can choose the size, and then it will default to the center after that. So, you might say anything up to a meter, I want to have it 40 mil from the top. Up to you. Otherwise, if you just want to always have it in the center of the handle, you can just leave this value all at 0. Totally up to you. Then we come down and we have the double draw pulls. So if you want to have 2 copies of this, you can tell it at which size you want that to happen on. Certainly less common, but the option's there. Now that I've done that, I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to go back to the settings of this job. and I'm going to assign this as my handle. So my drawer, again, I can click on the image and I can pick the particular handle there, or I could drop the menu down here and select it either way. And as you can see, I've got my drawers assigned and my drawers are now displaying that particular model. I'm going to show you this in a bigger view in a second. And same with here, I can drop that base handle down and whether or not I want it on my wall handles as well. And now all of my previews are showing those particular handles. So let's go across the products. Let's have a look at this in 3D view so you can see what I'm looking at here. So depending on whether or not you've got those options enabled and how you want that to look, but you can see the base handles are showing up really nicely there. And if I sort of zoom in and scroll around, you get a pretty good idea that it's pretty easy to bring a model in and then show that in Mozaik. Just by following a few of those simple steps and rules. So let's delete one of these out and maybe drop a drawer in there just to quickly show that. Okay, and we'll just sort of stretch that out to fit. And I want to quickly touch on sort of the 2D versions of this and why you might want to do it and sort of how you can go about it as well. I think those look really good. Gives you a pretty good indication and idea. Now you can see I've got a 2D version, right? So looking at this, it looks pretty good. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy with that personally from an elevation perspective. But you might want it simpler. You might not want to see that middle line and the different lines there that indicate kind of where it's folding. If you are happy with that, then there's nothing left that you need to do. And then from the top-down perspective as well, by zooming really close on one of these handles, what you'll see, again, it's giving me an indication of what it would look like. You might be perfectly happy with that. Again, then there's no need to do anything else. But if you want to give it a more simplistic sort of profile there, then you would need to create a 2D version of that. Like you could draw that out if you know how. One trick I like to use, just to give you a real quick sort of tip here, is I like to bring the 2D view of this into something like VCarve and vectorize it to give me the overall shape of that item. So just to show you that, if I was to right click on this and go save image as and save this, I might just put this, I might just drop this in my sort of downloads folder. And what I'm going to do here is switch over to VCarve, and I want to show you just how to vectorize something and then how to take that. I mean, you might be able to do that in SketchUp. I'm just sort of showing you my workflow. So I would just sort of create a new job here and then go ahead and import in that image. So I'm going to go and import in that particular image. There it is there. I'm going to click on that image and go to the vectorize trace bitmap symbol and go ahead and preview that. It looks like, we're getting a decent, I still want to edit it slightly anyway, but I'm going to go ahead and apply that. So I can delete the background image now. And this is all CAD lines now. So, I can right click on all that and ungroup it all. Cool thing there is I can take that particular outside shape of the handle and maybe I'll just move that over to the side here. And I'd probably do the same with this one. Again, grab the overall shape. Before I do that, I'm going to make some edits there. I would then want to scale it up to the right size. So this is the sort of, the front view for how it would look. Again, you can include or exclude those other things. Like particularly, you might want to actually include all of this so that way you can see those kind of stitch marks on at least the front view. Up to you how you want to do it, but I can select the whole thing there and go to my size object item and choose what size I want that to be. So you can see I can enter in a width of however big I need that item to be. It is showing me that the width of that is 169 millimeters, depending on all the items that I've got selected. So if I grab that and I want that to be exactly 160, I can just scale that to 160. And now it's scaled to that particular size. Again, then if I'm happy with that, I can right click on that and I could go to my, I can export that, right? So I can go File and export that as a DXF, and I might call that the Headich Bella Maybe that's the front perspective, so I'll go ahead and save that. And I could do the same thing here from the top perspective and swap that out as well. I'd need to make a few edits here. Like if I look at that, it's sort of going around and too far out there. I'd probably delete these outside two segments and then merge this together. So there's a bit of sort of work to do there on improving that. But just to sort of show you that overall workflow and process, I would then go back to SketchUp. I would create a new SketchUp model. So just go in and create a new, I'd delete the person out, and I would bring this DXF in. So I'd go File Import, and I'd import in that particular DXF. And you can see then the DXF is imported. Now that's looking, again, from the top down, it's correct, but I want to rotate that because I actually want it the other way around. So I would grab that item, Q for rotate, set my axis to the red by pressing the right, and then rotate that up. So now that's sitting in the right perspective from my front view. With this, it's a see-through kind of thing at the moment because there's no solidness to it. So whenever you import something into SketchUp, you do need to then double-click into the model and just trace over any one of those lines. If you trace over one of those lines, make sure you get it right, it will basically recognize that then as a shape and convert it to a solid object, as you can see. Most of the models inside of Mozaik are already facing the other way, so I'm going to reverse the face to keep that consistent. But then that gives me that overall perspective from a front view, and now I can save that. So just to show you that process, I could go File, Save As, again, make that a SketchUp 8 model. And in this particular case, like what we did with the arch pull example, I could just select one of those and select which particular one that I wanted to replace there, where I'm replacing the draw elevation view. So I'm just going to, the key thing is that tag of _ELE. That's the really key bit there. So I'm just going to select my draw version, and I'm going to add that in. So I'm just going to write _ELE and press save. And now basically, if I close and reopen Mozaik, I'll expect to see that elevation view of the draw one swapped out with the other one. So let's just save this job, exit Mozaik, reopen it, and we'll take a look at how that looks. So I'll bring this back over and again sort of stretch it up to size so you can see this a bit clearer on my screen. Open that job back up and go to products, look at that in elevation, and there we have it. So there you can see the updated sort of 2D version of that particular handle now displaying how I want it to display with those stitch marks and the sort of start all screw positions there. So hopefully that sort of gives you a real good overview of how you can go about importing in 3D models. The process isn't that difficult. It is really just a case of, making sure you follow the steps indicated in this video, making sure that you're saving them as a SketchUp 8 model, making sure that you're positioning those models correctly. If you follow those rules of thumb, you should be able to nail it. But hopefully this has been helpful. There haven't been too many questions come through. There's been a couple of questions, I think, that are off topic, but I'll just quickly throw to them now. We did have a comment there laughing at the first attempt where you could hear me, but you couldn't see my screen. Again, apologize about that. We're pretty new to the EVMux sort of streaming software, so it must have been something that I stuffed up there, or could have been the software itself. Let's take a look at the next one. So Brock saying, hey mate, is there a way to change my tall cabinet middle hinge location so they can be drilled by hand easier? So the tall cabinet middle hinge, let's take a look at that. If you are, let's just go ahead and create a new room. And we'll draw a quick wall. So let's drop in a tall cabinet. So a couple of things about the way the hinging works there. Let's look at that first. Let's go to the hardware library. And then hinges, you do have a control there on your hinges to decide when Mozaik will increase it from 2 to 3. Beyond that, on the tall cabinets themselves, you can go and override the hinge selection, but you can also press adjust and you can override the number of hinges. So by default, if I don't have override on and I take a look at this, let's go back to the 3D view of this product. You can see that I've got just the 3 hinges because the door itself is over 900 high. So it'll just have the 3rd hinge. If you want to change the location of that hinge, you can definitely use the adjust function to do that. So you click adjust, and then you've got an adjust for your top hinge, your bottom hinge, and your mid hinges. So you can click that one. If there's only 3, it's just going to show you one option there, and I can go ahead and add a value or subtract it, whether I want it to move up or down. So if I said 200 millimeters and OK, it's going to move up 200 millimeters. If I put minus 200, it's going to move down 200. So you can definitely adjust the hinges up or down accordingly. And that goes for the quantity that you're after. So if I wanted 5 hinges there and press adjust, I then have 3 adjustments because I've got the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th hinge that I can tweak the locations of. So that's definitely the easier way. I think what you've asked a 2nd question there where you're saying, so I want to set them to be a standard of 700 millimeters from the edge, but I need to be able to move them if they clash with a shelf. So by default, the way it works, it does equalize them. I suspect why you want them to be 700 is maybe you're drilling your doors on a Blum press rather than having Mozaik drill the doors. Certainly easier to have Mozaik drill the doors, especially with the flip sheet functionality. But if you want to drill on a Blum press, I can understand why you want to fix those locations. In that case, really, you would need to modify this product and have those hinges or those operations set exactly where you want them at 700 and then save it back into your library. There's no built-in function for that to be set exactly at 700 by default. So just to be clear there, you would go to parts, you'd click on the door, you'd go to edit operations, and you would flip the door over. Again, I'll make this a little bit larger, so hopefully it's a bit easy to see. You would select the operation, so like that hinge itself, and rather than be 500, I would go ahead and click the calculator and I would lock that in at 700. Now, you mentioned about, that was up and down, so obviously that one I didn't need to change. That way, I would just change the X value. So same thing. Now, you mentioned you did want it to be adjustable, and you would need to do the same, obviously, to the anchor holes. If you want it to be adjustable, I would create some parameters on the cabinet. So first I would go into the parameters area and I would just create a new parameter. And you could do this on a library level, not just on a product level. And you could use like custom rules as well to try and automate this as well. But just to show you in a simple view, this could be your hinge 1 location or something. Whatever you want to call it. Again, give it a description. I could write that as 700, and then maybe hinge 2. Again, depending on how you wanted to word it, you could follow the wording from what Mozaik had before, hinge 2, 3, 4. Again, give that a value. In the part itself, going to operations, same deal, flip it over. So rather than that just being fixed at 700, I would lock that to my parameter, hinge 1, and now that's variable. So just to show you that one hole moving as I change that parameter, if I go to parameter and go to hinge, so I've got that hole there at the bottom showing 700 up. If I wanted to change that to 600, type 600, and now it moves to 600. So definitely achievable. A bit of work that you'd need to put in on your end if you want to make your products that way. All right, so we've got another question to come through here. So, hey Dave, when I change the measurements of a custom cabinet to any new measurements, I'm guessing, my shelves and door measurements do not change as default, and it's so annoying. Any solution for that? Let me try and understand what you're saying there. So when you change the measurements of a custom cabinet to anything else, your shelves and door measurements stay the same. I'm guessing what you probably need to do, like I'll try and replicate this, right? I'm guessing what you've done, you've gone in and you've clicked on a shelf and you've gone to edit and you've changed the size. That would be the only way that you would modify this, right? So you might have just said, look, specifically, I want to make that 600. As soon as you've done that, that length comes up as red, shows you that you've overridden the value, and the part color changes. So the part is red, indicating that it's had an override. So if I look at my color codes, you'll see that the part shape or size has been modified. So if you're looking at that particular cabinet, one of your custom cabinets, have a look at the color indications. If they're red, it's probably a good indication that you've overridden the size. Because now, if I go ahead and, it wasn't the right size to begin with, but if I go ahead and change the size of that cabinet and I take a look at this product, obviously that shelf is doing exactly what I told it to do. It's staying at 600 millimeters. How to fix it? Really simple. Go to parts and just click rebuild all parts and hit OK. I'll hit yes, and everything's going to reset back to normal. None of the parts will have color codes anymore, and everything's going to behave as a standard item. If you've built a custom item where maybe you need to actually give that a formula, then that's what you'll need to do. You'll need to sort of put some formulas on that product to make it stretch to however you want it to stretch. So I guess we would probably need to see your exact example of that particular item. But hopefully that answers the question. All right, cool. Sounds like it has. So appreciate the update there. And that pretty much wraps it up. So apologize for the mix up at the start there with the first session. But hopefully this second session has really covered the question of how do I import 3D models into Mozaik. If there's any questions, drop them in a comment. But other than that, we will wrap this up. And I'll say thank you guys for attending and for your patience there. And let us know in the comments what you would like to see on future weeks. Do you guys enjoy these sessions? Are they working? Do you want me to do more of them? What sort of things do you guys want me to talk about? Happy to share the knowledge if you guys are willing to participate. So anyway, until next week, have a great weekend and we'll speak soon.